Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc. What creepy things have you noticed while at work? I work on North Sea oil rigs on an ad hoc basis, off the coast of Scotland. Wouldn't say anything was particularly paranormal creepy, but it can be very unsettling weird place. Fog can come rolling in out of nowhere, and other rigs you can see off the sides can disappear in front of your eyes. Sometimes you can't see the walkway 6 feet in front of you, or if you're walking over grating you can't see the sea below your feet, about 60 meters down from feck to sea, but you can hear it, albeit muffled. The fog can roll in over the course of a few minutes too, so a perfectly clear day becomes pea soup. You can also feel the rig moving, swaying on high winds, rough seas. Even though it's a fixed leg platform. Very unnerving to feel your office swaying when it shouldn't be. My last trip was my first ever night shift, and I found it particularly unsettling as you've got the background noise of the plant, but I walked around the whole rig without seeing another living soul for the whole shift. Usually there are about 130 people on board, although smaller rigs have smaller head counts. Usually once a trip I'm hit by this awareness that you are just very isolated and in the middle of nowhere. Most rigs I've worked on are an hour's chopper ride from land. So if things go wrong it can escalate very quickly. The ocean itself is terrifying. Thinking of the Dropler wave, a 90 foot, 30m, Rouge wave hitting an oil rig, damaging it but not irreparably. Then you have the RRS Discovery off Scotland recording 90 plus FT Rouge waves. Before those you had things like the Ocean Ranger, North Atlantic, 1981, a semi-submersible mobile offshore drilling unit sank with all hands in storm seas of 55 feet, 17m, to 65 feet, 20m, after a wave higher than 28 meters, 92 ft, flooded the platform's ballast control room, although there has been no official suggestion that it was caused by a rogue wave. Imagine just being obliterated without warning by a wave. I've been rolled by some serious waves, maybe barely 2 meters tall. Water is so heavy I can't imagine much could withstand 30 meters worth of water hitting you at once. When I was 15 years old, I was doing my 4 AM newspaper delivery round on bicycle. I was driving into the garden of this one subscriber where I saw 2 guys with flashlights looking through the windows of the house. I was a bit in shock and just said, "Good morning, guys." They were just as much in shock, and an awkward silence followed. I tried to break the silence by asking if I could pass them to deliver the newspaper through the door. One of the guys said the person living in that house did something to his family and they took it as an opportunity to get away in their car that was still running. When they were gone I rang the doorbell at the house to tell them what happened and they should keep an eye out. This is how you end up like that kid in Breaking Bad. I work as a polar bear guard. As in, I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of his head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes and rather creepy. Even knowing only a little about polar bears, that sounds like it can be a terrifying job. What was your closest call with a polar bear? Used to be a supervisor for a janitorial company, and a couple times a week I had to go to a middle school and clean their hallway floors and gymnasium with a Zamboni type vehicle that mopped and scrubbed the floor. When I was there I had the whole school to myself. Used to get finished quickly and go to the library and read while eating my dinner. Well, one morning after being there, I get a call from school security and they want me to come in. When I get there I see a police car too. Oh, I think. They ask me a few questions like, did you notice anything out of the ordinary or strange while you were here last night? No, I hadn't. Usually have headphones in. Security then shows me camera footage of someone breaking into one of the classrooms while I was riding the Zamboni not far away. I was there for another 2 hours. Nothing was stolen. But the worst part was they didn't have footage of the person leaving. They didn't go out the way they came in, and police had to sweep the entire school. Never did find out what happened with that one. We were wrapping up for the day in northern Canada. I am fueling up the side boom. I'm all by myself at this point cause I was tired of listening to the laborers whine of the cold, so I told them I would take care of the rest. Think bulldozer with no blade but a giant metal boom on the side that we use to razor and lower pipe. It's February, so pitch black. I keep hearing some weird sound. I can't quite hear it cause the pump is too loud. I search around a couple times and see nothing. I get in the truck and take off, drive past the front of the side boom to see a cougar sitting on top of a dirt pile 15 feet away. The damn thing was just watching me there and probably could have ended me without me even realizing it. I've never seen a cougar in the wild before and it's hard to understand just how big they are and how powerful until you see one up close. That thing leaped off the 6-foot pile and probably didn't touch ground for 15-20 ft. It's terrifying to think something so big and powerful could just be sitting there deciding if they want to make you dinner. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used, from what we knew, so we would get pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over. It was some mess, but the explanation was the wind making the noises as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the frick out. Rigs can make pretty scary noises. I had some shifts on a satellite platform and the wind would make scary noises at night. Working late at night on a remote mine site, changing out a switch in a substation on the edge of the pit. Just me and a quiet room full of gently humming transformers. I finish up and head for the door and I see 3 pairs of red eyes staring through the window. Nothing else visible, just blackness and 3 sets of red eyes. Turns out goat's eyes reflect red at night, and they like staring in windows. The goats who stare at men. Working on ships. There was one night I was on a ship sailing through Alaskan waters. And it happened to be my first night ever seeing northern lights. I can't believe how awesome that was. It made the sky clear, made the night look like it was dusk. We were able to see clearly for miles. Few buddies and I hit the roof, or what we call Lido deck, at 1 AM just to gaze at it. An hour or so in, there were 6 of us on top, nearly the entire crew now. A big white spotlight shines at us. We were near land, but where the spotlight was above the water and it wasn't low enough to be on a ship. This was very high up. It shined on us for about 15-20 seconds. Once the light turned off, we looked to see what it was. Saw nothing, no trace of an aircraft or anything. Couple minutes go by and the same light shined on us. This time it was on the other side of our vessel, above mountains. Still, unable to see what it was. We all saw it. We all have never seen any aircrafts hovering above these waters, especially at 2 AM. We don't know what it was. We think it might have been some sort of silenced aircraft the military was probably doing drills or something. But anyways, that was one of the weirder things to happen out on the ocean. Meanwhile, a drone operator stationed somewhere in Germany snickers. Spent a summer in Wyoming going to BLM land and other remote locations collecting data on bats and herpetofauna. Heard a lot of weird noises like mountain lions screaming, deer snorting, what sounded like owls fighting. Woke up one morning to find 2 bull moose sleeping 20 yards behind my tent. All of this was part of the job until one night a truck was driving towards us when we were on a BLM square in the southwestern part of the state. The truck was going overland, no road, and was slowly driving at us. It stopped about 100 yards away, turned off the lights, and we could see a person get out. They walked a full circle around us at 100 yards away, got back in the truck and turned around. This was after dark and this shadowy figure did a complete circle around us. You could hear them walking through the sagebrush and I'm sure they could hear us talking. We packed up after that and drove to a hotel an hour away. I called the office and told them I was taking a gun when we went back out. Didn't like having the bear mace as our only defense. Edit. BLM stands for Bureau of Land Management. You were probably just on some BLM land that someone had land rights to, and they weren't notified BLM people were going to be on their land. Certainly a creepier approach than when I've ran out to see who's on the land, but to each their own. Some friends and I were fishing a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water like someone throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We thought someone was messing with us and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later, I'm fishing a different pond and hear the same sound. Turns out it was a beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers become problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds in town. Sounds like the tail slapping worked. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the on-board cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. I worked for a guy that spearfished underneath the rigs out in the Gulf. He said it was perfect since there were tons of fish underneath, and the sharks would never go between the legs, just wait for a fish to leave. Plus the view was amazing, looking down and seeing nothing but abyss. He loved it. I can only imagine how scared I would be. I spent some time in the peat swamp forests of Borneo studying wild orangutan. We would go into the forest very early around 4 AM. One morning there was a clouded leopard on the trail we used to enter the forest. It was just crouched there watching us. We shouted, tried to act big. One of the indigenous people we worked with even took out his slingshot and shot rocks at it. He missed on purpose, just trying to scare it off. It stayed there for a good 5 minutes watching us before it slowly walked into the thick brush off the cleared trail. When we walked by, I shined my light to where it had walked to and could clearly see a pair of reflective eyes only 3 meters away, crouched watching us pass. Creepy, but also incredibly cool to see one in person for how critically endangered they are. Edit. Since I've got quite a few requests for pictures, I just posted a picture I took of a baby orangutan named Merca. Edit. These were wild orangutans. We tried our best to keep our distance and never tried to touch them. The goal was to observe them while trying not to affect their natural behavior. That being said, over my year there I did get charged by one of the big dominant males in the area on 3 separate occasions, which is its own terrifying story to tell another time. He never did touch me, but sure scared the hell out of me and made me run. Edit. Since a lot of people are asking. I am American who studied biology in college. How I got this job was a combination of luck and preparation. I worked my butt off in college and had field experience, and then we had a guest speaker one day who is a big name in orangutan conservation research talk to us. I had always wanted to go to Borneo and got to speak with her after the talk and discovered that she needed 2 students to go do research for a year after graduation. She interviewed me and the rest was history. I do want to mention to anyone considering this field that it is hard work. We would wake up at 3:30 AM. Spend 14-15 hours in a swamp forest following wild orangutans, taking data every 2 minutes. It was hot, humid and tons of mosquitoes. No communication to the outside world except on our days off, where we could take a 15-minute walk to a tree stand where we could sometimes get 1 bar of service to send a few WhatsApp messages to family. The camp was only 15ish people and we would spend 2-4 months there at a time before going back to the city, Palangkaraya, to bring back samples. The location of this research was in central Kalimantan, Borneo. That all being said, it was an amazing experience, of course. Saw animals and insects that just blew my mind and I miss it all the time. Happy to answer some more questions in PMs as low as I'm not flooded. I hunt you. We can literally see you, bud. I hiding. Go away, cat. Shoo. You're not fooling anyone. I stealthy. No. Go away. I am detected. I retreat slowly. You live this day, and I go elsewhere. There it goes. Hey, shine that light to make sure it actually left. I shine, I hunt you. I was the creepy occurrence. I live on a ranch off of a quite dirt road. Our distant neighbors, nearest house is about 1 mile away as the crow flies, have had issues with people stealing things out of their outbuildings and storage sheds in the area. It was also late in the year, so it was starting to get dark around 6 p.m. So as a result, every time I would see headlights go down our road, I would watch to make sure they weren't stopping on the property. One evening I see a vehicle going very slowly down the road and come to a stop at the end of our driveway, about 120 yards from our front porch. The vehicle is parked right in front of a 60s pickup I have parked, so I think whoever it is might be looking to steal it, or just looking over the property. Whatever the case, I decide to put on a black coat and grab my rifle to go investigate. It's dark out, so I stay out of the headlights of the vehicle so I can get close. I can tell it is a white van, but I don't see anything else distinguishing about the van. When I'm about 50 yards away, the van backs up and turns into our driveway. I freeze as the headlights wash across me standing in the middle of my driveway. And I see the reflective FedEx logos on the side of the van. Needless to say, the FedEx driver probably s his pants as he suddenly sees a dark figure standing in the middle of a field, in the dark, holding a rifle. Surprisingly, after I try to give a friendly wave and smile, he continues up the driveway to the house, and I get to explain the situation and we both have a laugh. So that's how I got to be the creepy guy in some FedEx delivery driver's story. Nice break from some of the darker stories here. Well placed tale. I spent several seasons working at a remote field camp in Antarctica. Over 1,000 kilometers from the main station in McMurdo. Every once in a while, a skua bird or Antarctic tern would accidentally end up following one of the small planes, Twin Otter, out to our camp. Once there though, they'd basically be stranded with no way to get back to the coast. I'd get out of my tent some mornings and see a lonely tern circling overhead, knowing it was a dead bird flying. It was quite creepy. Along these lines, when birds, or seals, do die down there, it's so cold and dry that their bodies don't decay either. They essentially mummify. Outside McMurdo at Scott's Discovery Hut, there is still a perfectly preserved seal carcass from 1912 sitting by the entrance of the hut. Edit. Dang. This kind of blew up. Been working all day and just getting back on now. The short answers to some of your questions are, I think it's that the birds more follow the contrails than the planes themselves, but I could be wrong. I just know from the various camp managers and other scientists down there, particularly biologists, that told me once a tern or skua gets that far away from the coast, they're basically toast due to lack of food and temps. I have some old pics from my 2008 to 2010 deployments. But only as partial albums in an old Flickr account. Knock yourselves out if you really want. Any album with Wace in the name was from Antarctica. https://www. Flickr.com photos. John for G albums. How did I get down there? I was in graduate school studying glaciology, paleoclimatology, and in some sense, geophysics. I deployed as part of a big NSF grant to extract and study an ice core record. I actually went back in 2015 to South Pole to work on that core as well. Last year, I deployed on a research ship off the coast of West Antarctica as part of an ocean sediment core team. Which was also quite interesting. You can get down there as a tourist as well, CAL expeditions, but it'll cost you over 10k. The most amazing place I visited was the area around Union Glacier to work on remote seismic and GPS stations. We flew all over to tiny exposed rocks in the middle of nowhere. It was quite surreal. Most of those pics are here, https://www. Flickr. Com photos Jomfaji album /72157628321851875. I watched the thing at least once a season, as is tradition. My little claim to fame factoid is that technically I was the first person to reach the South Pole in 2016. I went out to the marker at midnight on the 31st of December, 2015. Which also brings up the somewhat eerie notion that while at the South Pole, literally every person alive or dead is north of you, except for maybe astronauts on the ice. While at South Pole, I successfully completed the first every 50-mile running ultra marathon in -40°C temps. It was insanely stupid, but still kind of fun. See also here, https://www. YouTube.com watch V equals NGYU888. What's my job now? I still do research, but now I mostly teach at a university and work with grad students. See here, https://johnfedgy. Weebly.com. Did I miss anything? This is kind of fascinating. What did you do while in Antarctica? Not my story, but a close friend. He used to deliver newspapers in his Jeep CJ7, which was lifted and had long throw headlights for when he would go camping off-roading in it. He would be up as early as 3 AM to do his rural route, so he would be alert for deer and other wildlife that might try to cross the road in front of him. He was also big into cryptozoology. He believed in Bigfoot and other cryptids, so his mind was in that zone a lot on those mornings. One early morning he was driving slowly through a curve alongside a pasture when he heard an inhuman wail. He slowed down, and as he came out of the curve his headlights lit up a pair of eyes that had to be 10 feet off the ground. He stopped, backed up and tried to get his lights to illuminate whatever it was. He heard the wail again coming from the direction of the eyes, and he started freaking out, thinking he finally saw Bigfoot. As he was scrambling for his camera, his eyes adjusted enough to realize what he was actually looking at. The eyes were a bull's, and they were high off the ground because the bull was currently mounting a cow, which is where the wails came from. Our friend group ribbed him incessantly for that over the years, and anytime one of us would see him we'd ask if he found Bigfoot yet. Edited for clarity, since some people thought my friend and or his Jeep was mounting the cow. That is hilarious. Spent a summer doing conservation work out in the absolute middle of nowhere in Wyoming. Was part of a crew that would spend 2 weeks camping in remote places to do manual labor in places machines couldn't get to. For this story, we were building new biking trails in the back portion of a designated wilderness area in a high altitude desert. This means that the nearest civilization was a 2-hour car ride to a town of 41 people in a sandy soil area where tracks last forever. It was the middle of our stint during the early part of the night where everyone else had gone to bed, but I stayed up to read, so maybe 11:30 or so. Still pitch black outside, clouds had covered stars. So my headlamp was probably the only light on in a 40-mile radius. Suddenly I hear footsteps walking around our camp and head towards the tents from where I was in the community tent. That sound immediately put me on edge as I felt the hair on my arms raise and my adrenaline spike. I recall thinking to myself that two things are very wrong, since the person was not using a light to see and the footsteps were not coming towards me from the tents, rather it was the opposite. Within the 4 seconds it took me to drop my book, get up, and turn the corner of the tent to cast my light on the sleeping tents. The sound had stopped, but I saw tracks in dirt before me. Looked like they came from one end of camp, looked into my tent, walked through the sleeping tents and kept going out of camp again. I don't know if I was making too much noise or not by walking around, but the rest of my crew ended up waking up and asking me what was going on from inside their tents. After explaining what I found, they all got up to look at the boot prints in the dirt. They were damn near perfect copies of my own boots except for one small thing. I had a rock stuck in my treads that messed up the symmetry. I was wearing fairly common work boots, except I also happened to wear US size 15 double wide boots, so there was no way in hell this was one of the other crew members. I don't think any of us slept much that night. Never saw or heard anything more after that night. A light rain removed the tracks a couple days later, but I do remember none of us were willing to step on the prints themselves and choose to step over them like cracks in the sidewalk. Recommend any good conservation companies to work for? I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of km away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. Might as well be in space. My mom used to live in a small town in the Cascade Mountains and worked as a forest ranger. The creepiest thing that happened was when the oldest male ranger kept hitting on her and trying to get her to come home with him. Not very out of the ordinary, but many years later after she left the town she found out he had been convicted of manslaughter and had killed a young female ranger right before she got hired. She would have probably been his next target. More than 148 children. My parents live pretty far back in the country and have one neighboring house. The neighbors would let their basset hound outside for about 10 minutes to use the bathroom every morning. One morning they let him out, and he didn't come back inside. After a couple minutes they walked out to his favorite bathroom spot, and found his head. Judging from the tracks, a mountain lion had ambushed him and apparently torn his head off before carrying the body away. What I thought was the creepiest part was that the family hadn't heard a sound. Edit. Fixed spelling of basset. It's amazing what can happen in such a short amount of time and so close to, if not at, home. This is absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine seeing this happen to any animal, let alone a pet that I consider to be part of my family. I work for a medical examiner and used to be on the graveyard shift alone. The first night I was on at midnight on the dot, our air system shut off, which caused the vents to warp. That S sounded like somebody running through the vents in the ceiling on all fours. Thankfully I got used to it, lol, but def creepy at first. Another night we lost power and stupid me watching a horror movie working so hard almost s my pants when everything went dark and knowing that a room with around 30 dead bodies in it was walking distance away. That one I stayed in my car for. Not to mention the constant long dark red lit hallways. Glad I'm not on overnight now. Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind stranger. My first silver on Reddit. It only took 5 years and lots of lurking. Look at me now, mom. I consider myself to have pretty good resolve and the ability to deal with that type of stuff, but I don't blame you for sitting in your car. We have a PTO pump spot that comes out of a canal for our rice fields. When I was like 12 years old, my uncle found 2 bodies dumped in the little sump area where our pump sat. Both of the ladies that were dumped there had the same tattoos, so they think it was gang related, but it was 45 minutes away from where that gang operated. I still look in the hole every time I go by there, and that was 20 years ago. 45 minutes away from where the gang operated sounds exactly where a gang might dump some bodies though. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment.